Who is the worst teacher you've ever had? Third grade teacher. She had her teacher's pet that could do no wrong. One day she gets a low score on her test, and begins crying. To make her feel better, she points to the worst student in the class, that probably had an undiagnosed learning disability, and says in front of the whole class, "Don't worry, you could be like her and have an F carved into your report card." Even third grade me was like, wow, what a B. Mrs. Davis in first grade. One time, I had a messy desk. You remember those ones with the top that flipped up so you could store your books and stuff inside? She picked up the desk and literally dumped all my books and school supplies on me and made me clean it up off the floor while the rest of the class watched. Of course I started crying. What kind of sadist does that to a ducking 6-year-old? My 7th grade teacher did something similar, albeit on a smaller scale. He took my binder and shook it so that all the papers would fall out of it. Third grade teacher choked me against a blackboard. I remember looking out to my classmates and seeing the look of horror on their faces as I gasped for air. This was in '79. WTF. That's straight up attempted murder. WTF. She literally shoved a ball of duct tape in my mouth in front of the whole class because I couldn't hold in my laughter after my friend said something funny. What did your friend say? He asked me, did your father ever teach you how to act? I informed him that my father had died 4 years earlier. 2 weeks later my stepdad comes to pick me up for an appointment, saying he's here to pick up his child. Teacher over the phone with the office. You mean the deceased father is here for pickup? All through high school that teacher just kept doubling down. Never showed remorse for what he had said. He would chase me into other classrooms because I had a hat on and I needed to take it off. This gave me motivation to become the compassionate, empathetic, and awesome teacher that I am today. My kids always get the benefit of the doubt and I respect them. There was a sub that hit on me when I was a 15-year-old junior, describing his 4-inch D and bragging about the other girls he banged but saying they were legal because he waited until they graduated and turned 18. Tough to choose. Either the high school math teacher who pushed her students so hard, gave a punishing amount of homework, and did very little teaching. One of her students committed suicide because she put so much pressure in his life. She shrugged it off and continues in her position to this day. Or the community college teacher who locked the door so students couldn't get in or out of her classroom. A student told her that's illegal and, at the very least, she is breaking the fire code. She said, if you have a complaint, go to the office and file one. If enough students complain, a committee might look at it. If they do, a ruling is still months away, and as a tenured professor, and personally friends with many people on this committee, I can tell you nothing will come of it. Also, all she did is try and sell us some self-published book she wrote, and she changed the date time of the final 4 times. We had a teacher that was a neo-Nazi. I am dead serious. I don't think my junior kindergarten teacher was a neo-Nazi, but she was definitely racist. I started school in 2002, so 9/11 was still pretty fresh. Most of the students were non-white, immigrants or the kids of immigrants, and most were Muslim. My junior kindergarten teacher happened to dislike those groups, so she took it out on her 4-year-old students. She did shit like changed our ethnic names to something more Anglo. My easy to spell, easy to pronounce 3-letter Hebrew name was changed to Aaron. Only called on white, non-immigrant, Christian kids. Made fun of kids who kept halal or kosher. Yelled at me because I couldn't come to school on Yom Kippur. And talked shit about hijabi moms to the few white, Christian, non-immigrant parents. She got fired the next year because a few of the parents reported her to the school. Had a teacher who would give me detention every week. Reasons included talking during a group project, not bringing pencils, having long hair, calling him a bee. Having long hair? Did you go to a school with short hair as part of the dress code? Number. He yelled at me in front of the whole class that my hair is too long, that he can't tell if I am sleeping during his lectures because my bangs covered my eyes. Wow, that's really stupid. 5th grade teacher. I turned in homework late and he said, well, I'll have to call your parents to talk to them about this. I broke down crying and begged him not to because my stepdad would beat me. So when he called my house while we were eating dinner, he mentioned what I said, and my stepdad was even angrier at me for telling a teacher that he was abusive. Duck that teacher. Not worst, but weird. I went to a Christian school, so we have a religion teacher. It's like a theology class, but it's just odd because Mrs. P will always spend the whole session talking about her life experiences. One time, she talked about losing her virginity, she just got married, and how she bled and passed out on the bed after their first time, with full details and everything. I think everyone in class was horrified. Also, please note that sex education was taught much later due to our school being Christian. It was a hardcore Christian school. Pamela thought she used to throw heavy things at me for no reason. One time I was looking for a paper that I lost and she hid it from me. Then she proceeded to get mad at me for not finding it, so she threw a stapler at me. This was in 2nd grade. I am in 7th grade now and she still works there somehow. I'm gonna need the name of that school. Teacher here. So far my name, nor my grade and subject have popped up yet. Thank God. The anxiety is real. In 9th grade has a science teacher that did nothing and bragged about his wife doing all the work for him. Later he tried to hit on a college girl whose father was a teacher at the same school and was an ex-FBI agent. He was gone the next day. Dang, that's straight karma. Her name was Mrs. Lumpsdinachels and would whack me over the knuckles with a wooden 1-meter ruler. I used to call her Mrs. Lumpicnikers, so I can kinda see why I'd get the ruler, but still duck you Lumpicnikers. Early 2000s for date reference. Pastor Rivera, 11th grade religion class, Christian Academy. That man was disgusting. He openly favored the 3 pretty blonde girls in my class, calling them by pet names and rubbing their shoulders. He also referred to me once as the whore of Babylon. So that was fun. I had a lecturer who said mental illness wasn't real. Schizophrenia was a myth among other things. Cited Thomas Zass and a few others linked to Scientology. She was a historian covering the history of pharmacy. So I wrote my assignment on lithium. Partly out of interest, partly out of spite. Only time I ever had to get my grade revised. If you're going to mark me down on your own bias, maybe don't do it on something as objective as the 15 references I used when full marks only required 8. My 8th grade math teacher, F, made me, F, sit in the closet sometimes because boys in the class would try to throw things down my shirt and it was my fault for being a distraction. My organic chemistry professor, she was a total B during exams. She would walk around staring at everyone's papers. If she caught you writing down any wrong answers, she would slam her ruler down on the table and tell you to redo it. I feel like I have PTSD from that class. Seeing a hexagon to this day gives me major anxiety. I had an 8th grade math teacher who blamed every disturbance in the class on me. 6 years later I'm in college and working at Subway. She comes into my store. I ask if she remembers me, and she tells me that I ended up exactly where she thought I would. 2 years ago I got my master's degree and I'm halfway through my doctorate with a 4.0. I guess I thought more of myself than she did. My 5th grade teacher was probably one of the rudest men I've ever dealt with. He yelled and screamed at kids for the smallest things like breathing too loud or coughing and sneezing. He taught conspiracy as fact, tainting the knowledge of a lot of kids in his class for years after. By far the worst thing he did was throw a desk at a kid for asking to go to the bathroom. A math professor who was writing his notes on the board for 3 hours. But we also had these notes in our book, in the same order, word for word. He wasn't adding anything, no explanation. 6th grade I had an old hag of a teacher that just hated teaching. She was rude, talked down, etc. This led to a fellow student needing a therapist. Principal wouldn't allow her to transfer to a different class when she would have gotten the same teacher for a class in 7th grade. I think the fellow student left and became either homeschooled or went to another school. I felt really bad for her because the school didn't care. This teacher called me in front of the class and pinched my ear as a punishment for not kneeling properly during opening prayers. Catholic school. I was 7.